What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking after for the future. I'm also going to break down what the charts are telling us about Tesla and what you should be watching for tomorrow as I give you guys my price prediction. I'm going to break down something that Elon Musk put on his Twitter page, what the economic calendar is telling us about this week, as we have some major catalysts from Jerome Powell speaking, to not to mention the CPI report that's coming out. We have other important data to look at involving Tesla and the SPY and the overall market that will affect Tesla. Now, before I break anything down, before I talk about any data and give you guys my price prediction, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $2,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends in just 8 days. Check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Tesla was up 2.47% for the day on Friday, and I believe that Friday was the epitome of what on earth Tesla could do. So to start us off, okay, one of the biggest factors that affects Tesla would be the news. You always have to keep that in mind. When I make these predictions, I can't always predict the news. So sometimes there may be something that's a little off. But for the most part, I do believe that with technical analysis, you can understand what Tesla will do. And these technical indicators tend to be very, very good for understanding price action. So on Friday, Tesla had this big gap to the downside, and that's because of the news that came out about Tesla slashing their prices in China once again. This is due to the falling demand in China that's happening right now, as the savings rate has been increasing to some degree right over there. And I also want to note that in a couple of weeks we have Chinese New Year, so there may be a little bit of a slowdown, at least just temporarily over there, and that's completely normal. It happens almost basically every year, not almost every year, and that's completely fine because, like I mentioned in my previous videos, Tesla is doing very well in many different sectors. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect in terms of its share price for the rest of the year, but I'm still very impressed by their production. And then when the new models come out, I believe it's very possible for that to actually improve the share price performance. But we could talk about that a little bit later. I want to focus more on the shorter term, which is just this week. What should we be expecting? Now, another good thing that Elon Musk mentioned was looking at the US light vehicle sales in 2022 versus 2021. We could see Tesla had this very, very big increase. They're actually outperforming a lot of their competitors. And he's still suggesting that, look, maybe Tesla's going through this like phase where demand is slowing down, a recession is looming. We're about to see some hardships in America, not to mention in China. And with all this going on in the world, yes, things could be tough, but it's also a matter of interpretation, right? You could interpret some of Tesla's numbers that they came out with as pretty good, such as their production, right? 47% growth year over year is still very impressive. And I expect Tesla to announce more gigafactories in the future very, very soon, in my opinion, over the next few months. And on top of that, maybe there are things that could be interpreted as bad. That's completely fine. But you always have to remember the power of sentiment. Sentiment for the markets is not very good right now. People are panicking. We're seeing some capitulation, and it went too high to a point where everyone started buying into puts. They were just loading up on shorting the market again and again and again. And the data showed us relatively high put to call ratios, especially for Friday of last week. I'm sure you guys remember that. And this actually ended up decreasing a bit. It was over 2 in the very beginning of last week. So, because everyone was going short, the market makers were like, we're not going to be paying out that premium. They wanted to see the market pump. They looked at the data that came out and they used that data. They found something in the data to use as an excuse, if you want to go that route, to pump the market. And the data was also pretty decent at the same time. You could also interpret it that way. It did also help the market pumps because we are seeing some weakness on the job sector in America. So That did play a big role. That's part of why we saw a mini squeeze. That's part of why the market does have potential to continue. Now, Tesla's at a very historic low in its price pairs ratio. This means that over the last few weeks, Tesla's been very, very, very weak. It's been very underperforming compared to the markets. But I also believe that seeing this area right here, this is kind of similar to a resistance level in a way, because you could see we kind of bounced off here at one point. We came back down. That's because of the fact that we had the bad news that came out in China. But as long as Tesla does not have more bad news for this week, I believe this is set for a bit of a bounce. It's actually kind of, I know you shouldn't use this word, but it's kind of like oversold in a way. And it's set for a bit of a bounce. And I do believe Tesla will start outperforming a bit if the market continues to hold up. And as long as we don't get a major bad piece of news for the week, which I highly doubt in my opinion, I'm more optimistic and I think Tesla will start to outperform. We did get some nice buy ratings from many analysts, and we did actually see a lot of buying pressure coming into these zones, especially on Friday as the buyers came back to defend their positions. And on top of that, Tesla tends to be green, let me see, like 53% of the time on Mondays. So there is a lot of hope for tomorrow to be a relatively good day. And on top of that, with the high short interest, look at the shorting that happened on Friday. We saw more and more of the shorts pile in. The short interest went up again. Well, here's the deal. If the market keeps pumping, if Tesla keeps pumping, these shorts are not going to be in a good place. Many of them may have to start closing those positions. This could help boost Tesla even more. So please be on the lookout for this. Tesla's in a zone where it has relatively high short interest. And as long as the market starts pumping, if it does continue to pump, this could help Tesla get that extra boost. I mentioned this yesterday in my video. And on SPY, there is something I want to change about my analysis. I did mention the fact that we had some heavy resistance around this like 390 area. And I actually started studying the charts a little bit longer, and I do believe that because of what we're seeing in our technical indicators, I think upside is a little bit more likely than before. I'm actually a little bit more bullish than I was yesterday. I think I'm a little bit more confident. I'll just say that it's based off this divergence that formed on the MACD. We also had the same thing on the RSI, and we had other big things going on. I'm saying this because this is all suggesting to me that 374 was that temporary bottom. The market makers are going to continue to push up this market, but it's not going to be like kind of like a massive, massive squeeze or like something so insane. The markets, in my opinion, is going to establish a lower high relative to like 410, 408. We're going to not go that high, but we are going to push up to at least gap resistance. I think that if SPY continues to push, we could get to 393. And if we break that, 395 is still very possible. I'm a little bit more confident now seeing these technical indicators and more data, especially on the options chain, that we could see the market push up a bit because we are seeing more of the puts being closed. Very interesting to see. Now for Friday, we do have a relatively high put to call ratio. So the same thing could happen again where SPY ends up getting a bit of a boost, pushing back up to about 395 or so. It still is very possible. Maybe we get to 400. That's a little bit less likely. Depends on Jerome Powell and CPI. Don't forget that Jerome Powell is going to be speaking on Tuesday, and we know he could really move the markets like crazy. The market might see a big rally, or it could come tumbling down depending on what he says. And then for CPI, that could also cause the market to go either way, but most people are expecting CPI to be lower than expected. People are expecting CPI to come down, so we'll just have to wait and see on that. So anyways, let's talk about what on earth all of this could do to Tesla. If SPY comes down to retest this wedge a little bit, that would be completely fine, because if we establish a higher low and we see more buyers come in, this thing could continue to fly. And seeing, the MACD looking pretty strong, seeing the crazy buying pressure we got, whether we do come down just a little bit and then bounce and start pushing, or if we just fly into open, this thing looks like it could hit that 393 to 395 zone, and it does look a little bit more likely than before that we could actually break 390 in my opinion. So I've actually turned a little bit more bullish than I was yesterday, and I do apologize because my opinions are not always going to be exactly the same on a daily basis. Sometimes I could adjust things just a little bit. On the VIX, we haven't filled the gap yet. So this thing looks like it's going to break below 21. We could see this thing hit the 19 to 20 zone if it does continue to come down. But also remember, okay, it tends to get bounces around here. So maybe the VIX has more room to come down to the 20 zone. And then if it does end up coming that low, right, it could be getting ready for that big bounce once the market establishes a lower high, which I believe it's likely to do, which means more downside is still yet to come a little bit later in the markets. For Apple, very similar situation where Apple got a nice bounce off that 124 to 125 area. It's fighting for 130. If this thing breaks and holds 130, this could actually move SPY and also the QQQ to the upside. We have a gap up here. Let's see if Apple could do that. It seems a little bit more likely it is going to achieve that, seeing this setup. It might retrace a bit first and then continue to see a reversal later. If it does achieve that, that could help pump SPY and also the QQQ up. On the QQQ, okay, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about before I get into Tesla. The QQQ went to one of my previous targets. That's the 270 resistance. MACD is still open. RSI cooled off just a bit. It does look like the RSI might cool off a little bit more on here. So tech might cool down just a bit, but we could see a nice bounce. If this thing breaks 270, okay, this thing has a nice gap to 273. It could definitely fill that and then start fighting 274 to 275. What does this mean for Tesla? This means there is potential for upside for Tesla and Apple because of this if the QQQ gets that break to the upside, because Tesla and Apple could push it up. My point is, it's more probable that Tesla is going to be bullish than bearish for the week. Tesla's going to see some nice moves. It's more probable. The dollar index is also telling us that, look, coming down, we're still in this key demand zone, but we're not ready to see that big bounce that people are still waiting for, right? The dollar came tumbling down near the end of the day as the market ended up pushing. It's still in a very key demand zone area. So I do expect it to kind of chop back and forth. But later on, I do expect a big bounce in the dollar and this thing to start shooting up, maybe by like next week or maybe in 2 weeks. And that's when the market will likely start to see a big reversal. We're just not there just yet. And then finally, the 10-year Treasury yield. What do you notice? We have all these gaps to the downside. This thing is starting to tank. If it continues to come down, this would be a bullish signal for the markets. All right, enough about all these other things, guys. All these other things, sorry. Let's talk about Tesla, okay? And I do apologize if I went into too much of a tangent. Looking at Tesla, it looks pretty decent. What I like about it is the fact that, yes, we did come down to 101 off the bad news about China, but this thing made a comeback. It started pushing up. Lots of buyers came in. And if this continues, we need to break out of this 114.5-ish resistance. We actually tested it on, I think that's Friday. So once we tested it, if this thing breaks it, which I believe we will, we're going to be fighting for about 117 to 118. There's a zone right here. We have a zone of resistance. If we break this, if Tesla breaks 118 and you start to see like 119, 120, it's going to break past the gap resistance. Okay, so we got to break 117 to 118. And I believe it's very likely we will. If we break it, the gap could easily get filled and Tesla could squeeze past 122. And then we're going to start fighting for this next zone, the 125 zone, break that, then there's 130, 136, then the 140 to 142 level. What I think Tesla's going to do is this. Okay, there's a bullish and bearish thesis. Let me just go over those, and I'm going to break down what I predict to happen. If you are a bear, or maybe not like a bear, but if you believe Tesla is set to come down a bit with SPY, maybe we cool off a bit, or some bad piece of news comes out, you could argue that this thing is set to form an inverse head and shoulders. What if Tesla kind of like comes down and retests like 104, and see how we have the left shoulder, we have the head right here, the right shoulder could form. So Tesla could come down like this, get a big bounce, and then we basically redo this move right here. So Tesla, maybe hypothetically, it comes down here. If that happens, we hold 104, we would establish a higher low. This thing could get a big bounce. It could also happen within a day. It's also very possible. This thing could start to bounce and then break past the gap resistance and push all the way up to the 120s, right? That's one possibility, all right? The second possibility is maybe we don't form that inverse head and shoulders. Maybe Tesla just starts pumping with the market. Maybe the market just keeps going from Monday. We hold up, we consolidate, then Tuesday, Wednesday, and etc. come and Tesla keeps going. Then Tesla could eventually push back up to about 120, fill the gap, and continue to go past 125. If we could break past 125, the odds of Tesla getting closer to almost 140 becomes more likely because of the squeeze potential of this thing. I just wanted to note that. So my point is, a lot of indicators are pointing in the bullish direction for Tesla. There's so many different ways it could play out, whether we do end up forming an inverse head and shoulders to bounce or if we just keep going. Either one is very, very possible. And I believe, I mean, it's going to depend on the news, of course. You guys always have to remember that, right? Technical analysis does work. It tends to be very, very useful, but it's not everything. Sometimes you also have to look at the news just to give you guys more context. But I believe it's very probable that eventually, whether it's tomorrow or a little later, Tesla is going to break this and go for the gap fill, and we'll see Tesla above the 120 zone. And if Jerome Powell, I don't know what he's going to say on Tuesday. If this guy ends up pumping the markets, right? If something he says causes the market to pump, Tesla could go even higher. If he causes the market to come down and we kind of drop it before CPI, if CPI does very well, if we see CPI come down, that could also pump Tesla very hard into like 125 to 130 or even higher. So there's so many things that could play out. For tomorrow specifically, I'm predicting, okay, this is my prediction. I think we're going to come down a little bit into open, just a little bit. Maybe we're going to retest like 110 or so. And I don't know if we're actually going to come all the way down to 104 to form that inverse head and shoulders. It is a possibility, but I don't think that's going to play out. I think Tesla's going to it's going to retrace to about 110 to 108-ish, just a little bit, and then we're going to get a really nice bounce, and this thing's going to start pumping, and then Tesla's going to push and push and push, and hopefully we see this thing hit 117 to 118. We might get stopped around gap resistance, right? And then in the later days, it's very possible that we might just go for the gap fill. Now, if tomorrow Tesla breaks 118, I mean, it could even fill the gap as soon as tomorrow, but I don't want to be like, I don't want to be like way too bullish. I'm trying to be very conservative with my estimates, but I do believe Tesla's going to fight this zone right here, 116 to 118, this zone right here, and I think we might get stopped out. We may come a little short, and we may not fill this gap until a little bit later. And then as the next few days pass, if SPY continues to push and go for like 395, if there are more catalysts that push the market up, we could see Tesla start fighting for this 125 zone again. And the overall trend to me looks more bullish. We got the bullish divergence that formed in the very beginning. And then looking at the MACD, especially at the very end of the week, it got a lot stronger. We're seeing a stronger momentum that's building. RSI is starting to pick up. This thing looks like it's going to want to start going up, in my opinion, or at least respect an uptrend for the most part. And I do believe by tomorrow, we should see this thing testing 118, maybe even breaking it. We'll have to wait and see on that. But I do believe Tesla's going to come here. If it breaks it, then we could fill the gap and see this thing in the low 120s pretty darn fast. It may even happen all in one day. That would be like the most ideal thing. And if that's the case, I mean, Tesla looks like it wants to go. It looks like it really wants to go. This is also resembling, and this is just me trying to be theoretical, but this looks like a mini Wyckoff accumulation schematic. We had a kind of like a spring-like move right here. We might come down a bit for the test if that did not come yet, before the last point of support, the SOS phase, followed by phase E, which is where we get that last pump, which should happen either on Monday or Tuesday, causing Tesla to push to fill this gap or go even higher, right? So like I said before, whether you're looking at this from a Wyckofian standpoint, whether you're looking at just technical indicators, whether you're looking at what SPY is doing, they're all pointing in the direction that Tesla should respect an uptrend from a technical standpoint. Once again, I did not mention the news. I don't know what the news will say tomorrow morning, but I think it's very likely we're going to retest this area right here, the area I highlighted, this 118 area. And if we break it, we could go for the gap fill. We could see Tesla continue to pop to the upside, but this thing needs to fight. We need to see buyers come in for that to happen. Now, I did mention I do expect maybe a bit of a retracement in the very beginning to about 110 or so, maybe a little lower, maybe 108 gets touched, followed by a nice bounce and a nice rally once again to the upside, and Tesla should come to this zone right here, maybe break a little higher. I would really hope for that. But overall, the trend looks more bullish than bearish, and let's just wait and see what Jerome Powell says on Tuesday, not to mention CPI on Thursday. So it's going to be very important for this week. With that said, thank you all so much for listening. Please enjoy your weekend. Remain calm, cool, and collected. I wish the best for everyone. Test it to the moon because the long-term future is still incredibly bright. And peace out.